There is something you have been carrying for a very long time, and I want you to know I see it. Not the version of you that gets dressed in the morning and shows up and smiles and says, "I'm fine," when someone asks. Not the version that pushes through deadlines and handles responsibilities and keeps everything moving. I am talking about the other one. The one underneath all of that. The one who lies awake at 3 in the morning wondering why, despite everything you have accomplished, despite every mile you have walked, something still feels incomplete. Something still feels off. That feeling has a name. I call it the fracture. And the reason most people never heal it is because most people never dare to speak it out loud. You were taught to be strong. I was too. You were told that vulnerability was weakness, that admitting pain was self-pity, that the way forward was always to push harder, work longer, smile brighter. And so you did. We all did. We built lives on top of fractures, the way someone might build a house on a cracked foundation, and then wonder why the walls keep shifting. I remember the first time I truly sat with my own fracture. Not fought it. Not analyzed it. Not tried to pray it away or think it away or talk myself out of it. Just sat with it. I was in a quiet room, no distractions, no noise, and for the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had been running from. And what I felt was grief. Not grief for a person. Grief for a version of myself I had abandoned somewhere along the way. A version that was whole. A version that trusted life. A version that had not yet learned to be afraid. That grief cracked me open. And I am grateful for every piece. Because here is what nobody tells you about fractures. They are not the enemy. They are the evidence. Evidence that something inside you tried, that something inside you reached, that something inside you cared enough to break rather than surrender entirely. A person who has never been fractured has never truly loved anything, has never risked anything, has never stood at the edge of something real and leaned into it. You are not broken because you are weak. You are fractured because you were brave enough to live. But there is a difference, and this is the part I need you to hear, between a fracture that teaches you and a fracture that defines you. Between a wound that becomes wisdom and a wound that becomes a wall. So many people I have met, so many people I have spoken with over the decades, are living behind those walls. They call it protection. I call it prison. And they cannot see the bars because the bars are made of old stories, old pain, old identities that were handed to them by people who were also fractured and also afraid. Ask yourself right now, what story are you still telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve? What wound from 10, 15, 20 years ago is still writing the script of your daily life? What fracture that was never your fault has somehow become your permanent address? You do not live there anymore. That is what this is about. This is not a speech about positivity. I am not here to tell you to smile more and think happy thoughts. This is a conversation about something far more serious and far more sacred, the restoration of your original pattern. The return to the wholeness that was always yours before the world got its hands on you and told you otherwise. The fracture is real. I will not pretend it is not. But the pattern beneath it, the unbreakable, original design of who you truly are, that is more real. And we are going to find our way back to it, together, starting right now. Before the world gave you a name, before anyone handed you a religion or a rule book or a role to play, you were whole. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not as a pleasant idea. Not as a motivational phrase you read on a wall somewhere. I want you to sit with it as a fact. A biological, spiritual, undeniable fact. You came into this world with a pattern already encoded within you. A pattern of completeness. A design that knew exactly what it was doing before your conscious mind ever had a single thought. Watch a child, a very young child, before the conditioning begins. Before the criticism lands. Before the comparisons start. What do you see? You see someone who moves without apology, who laughs without calculating whether the laugh is appropriate, who cries without shame and reaches out without fear of rejection, who exists fully and completely in every single moment. That child is not performing wholeness. That child is wholeness. And that child was you. Something happened between then and now. Something always does. Life arrived with its sharp edges. People arrived with their limitations and their projections. Experiences arrived that were confusing and painful and too big for a small heart to make sense of. And piece by piece, quietly and without your permission, the original pattern got buried. Not destroyed. Buried. Covered over by layers of adaptation and survival and learned smallness. I have spent the greater part of my life studying the subconscious mind, how it stores experience, how it shapes belief, how it constructs the invisible architecture of everything we call our reality. And one of the most profound discoveries I have made, not from books, but from watching human beings transform in real time, is this. The subconscious mind never forgets the original pattern. Never. No matter how deep the burial, no matter how many years have passed, no matter how thoroughly a person has convinced themselves that who they are now is all they will ever be, the original pattern is still there, waiting, patient as a seed in winter ground. You know what I realized after years of working with people who thought they were too far gone? Not a single one of them was. Not one. The man who had spent 30 years in bitterness. The woman who had carried shame since childhood like a stone around her neck. The young person who had already decided, at 25, that they were fundamentally flawed and nothing would ever change. Every single one of them had the pattern intact. The wholeness was not gone. It was simply buried beneath the weight of everything they had been told and everything they had survived. Think about a river that has been dammed. The water does not disappear. It does not cease to exist simply because something is blocking its flow. It collects. It waits. It builds quiet pressure behind the obstruction. And when the dam finally breaks, or is gently, deliberately dismantled, the river does not need to be taught how to flow. It already knows. It has always known. The knowledge was never lost. Only the freedom to express it was temporarily taken away. That is you. That is your wholeness. It has been collecting behind every wall you built, every defense you constructed, every identity you adopted just to survive the seasons of your life that felt unsurvivable. And it is not angry at you for blocking it. It is not disappointed. It has simply been waiting, with a patience that puts human patience to shame, for you to begin the work of clearing the channel. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you felt, even for a brief moment, completely like yourself? Not the self you perform for others. Not the self that shows up to meet other people's expectations. The self that felt easy and true and right. Maybe it was in nature. Maybe it was in a moment of genuine laughter. Maybe it was in the middle of creating something, or holding someone you love, or sitting in silence and feeling, just for a second, at peace with your own existence. That moment was not an accident. That was the pattern surfacing. That was your wholeness reminding you that it is still there. And here is what I know with absolute certainty. The work of inner renewal is not the work of building something new. It is the work of remembering something ancient. of clearing away everything that was never truly you, so that what has always been you can finally breathe again. The pattern was never broken. It was never lost. It was only waiting for you to come back to it. And you are here. So the return has already begun. Nobody warns you about the night shift. Not the darkness outside your window, that one you can handle. You close the curtains, you turn on a light, you wait for morning. No. I am talking about the night shift that runs inside your own mind. The one that begins the moment the distractions fall away. The moment the television goes off and the phone goes down and the busyness of the day can no longer drown out the noise beneath the noise. That is when the real work begins. Not the work you chose, but the work your unguarded mind does on its own in the dark without your conscious permission. I want to talk to you honestly about the subconscious mind. Not in the language of textbooks or laboratories. In the language of lived experience. Because I have lived this. I have sat in the darkness of my own mind and watched what it does when I am not steering it. And what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about why human beings suffer. The subconscious mind is not cruel. I need you to understand that first. It is not your enemy. It does not work against you out of malice or indifference. It works according to a simple, unwavering principle. It reproduces whatever it has been given. It is the most faithful servant you will ever have. The tragedy is that most of us, without knowing it, have been feeding it poison and then wondering why we keep harvesting pain. Every thought you think with feeling becomes an instruction. Every belief you hold with conviction becomes a command. Every story you repeat about yourself, consciously or unconsciously, becomes a blueprint that the subconscious mind executes with breathtaking precision and zero judgment. It does not distinguish between what is true and what is merely familiar. It does not evaluate whether your beliefs serve your highest good. It simply builds what it is given. It simply grows what it is planted with. I remember a period in my own life when I could not understand why I kept arriving at the same place no matter which road I took. Different circumstances, different relationships, different opportunities. And yet the same outcomes, the same feelings, the same quiet sense of defeat waiting for me at every destination. I was working hard. I was trying sincerely. I was doing everything a person is supposed to do. And still, something kept pulling me back. Like a current beneath the surface of a river, invisible but powerful, running in a direction I had not chosen and could not see. It took me a long time, longer than I care to admit, to understand what that current was. It was the accumulated deposit of every limiting belief I had absorbed since childhood. Every time someone told me I was too much or not enough. Every experience that taught me the world was unsafe or that love was conditional or that success was for other people. Every wound that never fully healed and quietly hardened into a belief. All of it had settled into the subconscious like sediment at the bottom of a river, and that sediment was directing the current of my entire life. Here is what the mind does in the dark. It rehearses. It replays. It reinforces. Left unsupervised, the subconscious mind will spend its nights deepening the grooves of whatever patterns already exist within it, whether those patterns serve you or destroy you. Scientists call them neural pathways. I call them ruts. Deep, worn, comfortable ruts that feel like truth simply because they are familiar. And the longer you travel them, the deeper they get, and the harder it becomes to imagine any other direction. But, and this is the part that changed my life, those ruts can be changed. Those grooves can be rewritten. The subconscious mind, for all its stubbornness, is not a fixed structure. It is living tissue. It responds to new input. It reorganizes around new belief when that belief is introduced with enough consistency, enough emotion, and enough genuine conviction to penetrate beneath the surface of conscious thought. You know what that means? It means the darkness is not the end of the story. It means the night shift can be redirected. It means the same faithful servant that has been building your prison can, with the right instructions, begin building your freedom instead. The question is not whether change is possible. The question is whether you are willing to take back the controls. Whether you are willing to become conscious of what you have been unconsciously feeding the most powerful force in your inner world. Because the mind will keep working. Through the night, through the years, through every season of your life, it will keep building. The only thing you get to choose is what it builds. Choose carefully. Choose deliberately. Choose as if your life depends on it. Because it does. There was a morning, I remember it with the kind of clarity that only comes from moments that permanently alter the direction of a life, when I sat down on the edge of my bed and simply could not get up. Not because I was physically ill. Not because the day ahead was unusually difficult. But because something inside me had reached a limit that no amount of willpower could push past. I had been fighting. For years I had been fighting. Fighting my doubts. Fighting my fears. Fighting the voice inside that told me I was not measuring up. Fighting the gap between who I believed I should be and who I actually was when no one was watching. And that morning, the fighter in me sat down and refused to stand back up. I want to be honest with you about what that felt like. It did not feel like surrender in the noble sense. It did not feel peaceful, or enlightened, or spiritually significant. It felt like failure. It felt like the bottom of something I could not yet name. I sat there in the gray quiet of that room and I felt the full, unguarded weight of my own exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, but the exhaustion that comes from spending years at war with your own interior world. And then something happened that I did not expect. In the middle of that exhaustion, in the very pit of that surrender, something got quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The noise of the battle stopped. And in that unexpected quiet, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I could actually hear myself. Not the self that argued and analyzed and strategized. The deeper self. The one beneath all the fighting. And what that self said to me in a voice barely above a whisper was this: you do not have to win this war. You only have to stop fighting the wrong enemy. The wrong enemy. Those words rearranged something fundamental inside me. Because I realized, sitting there on the edge of that bed, that every battle I had been fighting was a battle against myself. Against parts of myself I had decided were unacceptable. Against memories I had decided were unforgivable. Against fears I had decided were unworthy of a person who wanted to live with purpose and power. I had been at war with my own humanity. And you cannot win that war. No human being can. Because the parts of you that you fight do not disappear. They go underground. They get stronger in the dark. They find other ways to surface. And the energy you spend fighting them is energy stolen from the actual work of becoming who you are meant to be. Ask yourself right now, what are you fighting inside yourself? What part of your own story, your own nature, your own history are you at war with at this very moment? Because I want to tell you what I learned that morning, and I want you to hear it not as philosophy but as something I paid for with years of unnecessary suffering. The moment you stop fighting yourself is not the moment you give up. It is the moment you grow up. It is the moment you graduate from the exhausting, futile project of self-rejection and enter into something infinitely more powerful, self-understanding. Not self-indulgence. Not self-pity. Self-understanding. The willingness to look at every part of your interior landscape, including the parts that shame you, including the parts that frighten you, including the parts you have spent decades trying to hide from yourself and everyone else, and say with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, I see you. I want to understand you. I am no longer going to pretend you do not exist. That morning cracked me open in the best possible way, because the war ending did not mean the work ended. It meant the real work could finally begin. The work of integration rather than rejection. The work of understanding rather than suppression. The work of welcoming every fractured piece back to the table, not to celebrate the fractures, but to understand what they were trying to protect, what they were trying to say, what they had been carrying on my behalf while I was too proud or too afraid to carry it myself. The healing did not begin the day I got stronger. It began the day I got honest. And if there is one gift I could hand you through everything we share together in this conversation, it would be this. Stop making an enemy of yourself. The real renewal, the deep restoration we are talking about, cannot happen on a battlefield. It can only happen in a place of genuine peace. And that peace begins not when your circumstances change, not when your past is erased, not when you finally become the perfected version of yourself you keep waiting to become. It begins the moment you lay down the weapons you have been turning on your own heart. Lay them down. Right now. They were never meant for you. Every single day, without exception, you are having the most important conversation of your life. And most people have no idea it is even happening. It is not the conversation with your boss or your partner or your closest friend. It is not the conversation you rehearse before a difficult meeting or replay after an argument. It is the conversation running underneath all of those, the one that never stops, never sleeps, never takes a weekend off. The conversation you are having with yourself. Inside the privacy of your own mind, in the space between one thought and the next, a voice is speaking. And that voice is either building you or dismantling you. There is no neutral ground. There is no conversation that simply passes through without leaving a mark. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly, not to me, but to yourself. If the voice inside your head belonged to another person, if someone followed you around every single day and said to you the things you say to yourself, would you keep that person in your life? Would you allow someone to speak to you the way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake? When you fall short? When you look in the mirror and begin the quiet, devastating inventory of everything you believe is wrong with you? Most people, when they truly sit with that question, arrive at a very uncomfortable answer. We would never tolerate from another human being the cruelty we routinely practice on ourselves. We would call it abuse. We would call it toxic. We would draw boundaries and walk away. And yet, because it happens on the inside, because no one else can hear it, we have somehow normalized it. We have accepted the inner critic as a permanent resident, given it the best room in the house, and then wondered why we never feel truly at home in our own lives. Here is what I discovered, and this discovery did not come from reading, it came from doing, from practicing, from failing and trying again until it became as natural as breathing. The inner dialogue is not fixed. It is not a life sentence. It is a habit. And like every habit, it can be interrupted, redirected, and over time completely transformed. But, and this is critical, transformation does not happen through force. You cannot bully your subconscious into new patterns. You cannot scream affirmations at a mind that does not believe them and expect lasting change. I tried that. Many people try that. You stand in front of a mirror and declare things you do not feel, and the deeper mind simply looks back at you, unimpressed, unconvinced, waiting for you to finish performing so it can return to its established programming. Real reprogramming happens through a different mechanism entirely. It happens through repetition married to emotion. through consistency married to genuine feeling, through the deliberate, patient practice of introducing new thought patterns into the subconscious not as commands barked from the surface, but as seeds planted in fertile ground, gently, persistently, with genuine belief in their capacity to grow. Let me tell you what this looked like in my own life. There was a belief I carried for years, deep, stubborn, seemingly immovable, that I was fundamentally undeserving of lasting peace. Not undeserving of success, not undeserving of achievement. Those I could accept, but peace. Genuine, quiet, unearned peace. That felt like something for other people, something I had not yet qualified for. And every time life offered me a moment of stillness, some part of me would find a way to disturb it, would manufacture anxiety where there was none, would locate a problem to solve, a worry to carry, a reason why comfort was premature. I had to reprogram that belief at the root, not by arguing with it, not by telling myself I was wrong to feel it, but by consistently, every single day, choosing thoughts that told a different story, by catching the old narrative mid-sentence and gently, firmly redirecting it, by feeding the subconscious new material through prayer, through meditation, through the deliberate repetition of truths that aligned with the wholeness I was working to restore, until those new patterns began to feel more familiar than the old ones. It did not happen overnight. Real change never does, regardless of what anyone tries to sell you. But it happened. Gradually, then unmistakably, then permanently. The inner dialogue shifted. And when the inner dialogue shifted, everything that the inner dialogue had been constructing, my experience of relationships, of work, of my own body, of what was possible for my life, everything shifted with it. Your words are not just words. They are instructions. They are architecture. They are the raw material from which your experienced reality is built, one thought at a time, one day at a time, one conversation with yourself at a time. So choose them, deliberately, consistently, as if everything depends on them. Because everything does. Most people want the harvest before they have prepared the ground, and I understand that impulse completely. When you have been waiting long enough, when you have hurt long enough, when you have carried the weight of an unlived life long enough, the desire for immediate change is not impatience. It is hunger, a deep, legitimate human hunger for something better than what has been. And there is nothing wrong with that hunger. In fact, that hunger is sacred. It is the signal that something in you knows you were made for more than what you have been settling for. But hunger alone does not produce a harvest. And this is where so many sincere, well-meaning, genuinely desperate people get lost on the path to renewal. They bring the seed, the new intention, the new affirmation, the new commitment, the new beginning, and they plant it with great ceremony and great hope. And then they wait. And when the seed does not immediately become a tree, when the transformation does not arrive on the schedule they had imagined, something inside them concludes that the seed was defective, that they were defective, that renewal is available for everyone except, somehow, for them. But the seed was never the problem. The soil was. I want to tell you about a man I knew many years ago, a man of genuine intelligence and sincere spiritual hunger. He had read every book, attended every seminar, could articulate the principles of inner transformation with a precision and eloquence that left audiences moved and inspired. And yet his life, the actual lived texture of his daily experience, had barely shifted in 15 years of sincere seeking. He was mystified. He was discouraged. He had begun to privately suspect that these principles worked for others but were somehow inaccessible to him specifically. When we sat together and talked honestly, not about the principles he knew intellectually, but about the ground in which he was trying to plant them. What we found was this. Beneath the beautiful new seeds he kept planting was soil saturated with unprocessed grief, with resentment he had never fully acknowledged, with a foundational belief inherited from a painful childhood that the universe was fundamentally indifferent to his well-being. He had been planting seeds of abundance into soil that believed at its deepest level in scarcity, seeds of love into soil that believed at its deepest level in abandonment, seeds of peace into soil that had never been cleared of the rocks of old anger and old fear. The seeds were perfect. The soil was the work that had not yet been done. Ask yourself right now, what is the actual condition of your interior ground? Not the surface. Anyone can cultivate a pleasant surface. I am talking about the deep soil, the part that holds the oldest stories, the part that formed in childhood and early experience and has been quietly influencing everything that grows or fails to grow in your life ever since. Is it nourished or depleted? Is it open and receptive, or is it compacted by years of unexpressed emotion, unresolved experience, beliefs that have never been examined in the honest light of your adult understanding? Preparing the soil is not glamorous work. It does not make for exciting content or dramatic before and after stories. It is slow. It is quiet. It requires a willingness to dig in places that are uncomfortable and dark and that smell sometimes of things you would rather leave buried. It requires the courage to examine what you actually believe, not what you want to believe, not what you tell others you believe, but what you genuinely, operationally believe at the level of your lived experience. Because your life right now in every dimension, your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose, your experience of joy or its absence, is a precise and honest reflection of the condition of your inner soil. Not a judgment, a reflection. And a reflection can be changed, but only by changing what it reflects. This is why renewal is not an event. It is a process. It is the patient, faithful, daily work of tending to your interior ground, clearing what needs clearing, nourishing what has been starved, loosening what has become rigid, creating genuine receptivity in a place that perhaps, for a very long time, has been defended against the very things it most needs to receive. The most beautiful gardens in the world did not begin as beautiful gardens. They began as work, as intention married to patience, as someone who cared enough about the harvest to invest deeply and lovingly in the ground. You are the gardener, and you are also the garden. Tend yourself accordingly. Let me say something that may disturb you before it liberates you. Forgiveness has nothing to do with the person who hurt you. Nothing. Not a single thing. It is not about their redemption. It is not about excusing what they did, or pretending the wound was smaller than it was, or manufacturing a warmth towards someone who caused you genuine damage. It is not about reconciliation. It is not about forgetting. It is not about standing across from the source of your pain and offering a gracious smile and saying, with convincing sincerity, that everything is fine and the past is the past and you have moved on. That is not forgiveness. That is performance. And performance, however polished, does not heal a single cell of the damage living inside you. Real forgiveness, the kind that actually changes something in the body, in the mind, in the deep interior architecture of a human life, is an act of radical self-liberation. It is the decision, made not for anyone else but entirely for yourself, to stop allowing a past experience to continue writing the story of your present moment. It is the refusal to let someone who may not even remember hurting you continue to occupy the most valuable real estate in your inner world, rent-free indefinitely, at enormous cost to your own peace and possibility. I have met people who have held unforgiveness for 30 years, 40 years, carrying it the way you might carry a stone in your chest, always there, always heavy, shaping the posture of everything else. And when you ask them about it, when you gently bring it to the surface, you can see it immediately. The jaw tightens. The eyes change. The energy in the room shifts. All these years later, the person who caused the original wound is perhaps living comfortably somewhere, perhaps not even thinking about it, perhaps long gone from this world entirely. And yet here, in this living body, in this present moment, the wound is as fresh and as powerful as the day it was made. Who is suffering in that arrangement? Who is paying the price? I want to tell you about a woman I worked with years ago, a woman of remarkable strength and intelligence who had built an impressive life by almost every external measure. But beneath the accomplishment was a layer of cold, quiet rage directed at her mother. A mother who had been critical and withholding and emotionally unavailable in ways that had shaped this woman's entire relationship with herself and with love. The mother had died years before. And still, every morning, the daughter woke up into a world colored by that old, unresolved wound. She told me she could not forgive. Would not forgive. That forgiving felt like saying it was acceptable. Like erasing the reality of what she had lived through. Like betraying the child she had been, who deserved better and never received it. And I told her, that child did deserve better. Absolutely and without question. What happened to her was not acceptable. It was not her fault. It did not need to be minimized or reframed into something prettier than it was. All of that was true. And also true simultaneously, without contradiction, the unforgiveness she was holding was not protecting that child anymore. It was imprisoning the woman that child had become. Forgiveness is not saying it was acceptable. It is saying I refuse to let it continue to be consequential. That distinction changed everything for her. And it may change everything for you. Because here is the physiological truth that no amount of philosophical argument can dismiss. Unforgiveness lives in the body. It is not merely an emotional position, it is a biological state. The stress hormones generated by sustained resentment, by the repeated mental and emotional rehearsal of old pain, create measurable damage in the physical body over time. The immune system is compromised. The nervous system remains in chronic activation. The capacity for genuine joy is narrowed by the constant background hum of unresolved anger. You are not just carrying an emotional burden. You are carrying a physiological one. And your body is paying the bill for a debt that someone else created. Releasing that is not weakness. It is the most powerful act of self-care available to a human being. Ask yourself, who are you still holding in the prison of your unforgiveness? And are you willing to consider, even for a moment, that the prison door locks from the inside? That you have been holding the key all along? That the release you have been waiting for, the lightness, the freedom, the genuine fresh start you keep hoping some new circumstance will deliver, has been available to you through a decision that no external event can make for you. Forgiveness begins the moment you decide your peace matters more than your position, more than being right, more than the satisfaction of keeping the wound open as evidence of what was done to you. Your peace matters more. It has always mattered more. Claim it. Here is something nobody prepares you for when you begin to change. The people around you will not always celebrate it. Some of them will resist it. Some will question it. Some will become quietly uncomfortable in ways they cannot articulate and you cannot fully explain. And some, the ones whose resistance runs deepest, will actively, sometimes aggressively, try to pull you back into the version of yourself they are most familiar with. The version that fit neatly into the role they had assigned you. The version that confirmed their own beliefs about who you are and what you are capable of, and how much space you are allowed to occupy in this world. And if you are not prepared for that, it can stop you cold. Because there is nothing quite as disorienting as doing the most courageous work of your life and discovering that the people closest to you are not cheering from the sideline. That the ones you most hoped would witness your becoming are the ones most disturbed by it. I have lived this. Let me be absolutely clear about that. I am not speaking theoretically. There was a period in my life when I began to genuinely shift. When the inner work I had been doing began to produce visible, undeniable changes in how I carried myself, in what I would and would not accept, in the boundaries I began to establish, in the quiet confidence that began to replace the anxious people-pleasing that had governed so much of my earlier life. And I noticed something that both surprised and wounded me. Certain people in my life, people I loved, people I had history with, people whose opinion I had spent years trying to earn, did not respond with warmth to these changes. They responded with suspicion, with subtle sabotage, with comments designed to remind me of who I used to be, as if who I used to be was more real, more valid, more trustworthy than who I was becoming. You know what I realized? Their resistance had nothing to do with me. Not really. It had everything to do with what my change was silently asking of them. Because when someone close to you genuinely transforms, it creates an invitation, an uncomfortable, unwanted, unasked for invitation for everyone around them to examine their own lives, their own choices, their own areas of stagnation and avoidance and unlived potential. And not everyone is ready for that invitation. Not everyone has the courage to look at what your transformation is holding up as a mirror. So they push back. Not because you are wrong, because you are right. And your rightness is inconvenient to the story they need to keep telling about themselves and about you. Ask yourself right now, whose voice is in your head telling you that this change is too much? That you are getting above yourself? That the person you are growing into is somehow a betrayal of where you came from or who you have always been? Whose words have found a permanent home in your interior world, whispering their limitations into your most vulnerable moments? Name that voice. Not with anger. With clarity, because you cannot address what you cannot identify, and you cannot protect your healing from an influence you have never honestly examined. Here is what I want you to understand with every part of your being. Your healing does not require anyone's permission. Your growth does not need a consensus. Your renewal is not a group decision subject to the approval of people who are still comfortable with the old version of you, the version that was easier to manage, easier to predict, easier to keep in a familiar shape. Healing is sometimes the loneliest road you will ever walk. Not because it leads away from connection. Ultimately, genuine healing leads toward deeper, more authentic connection than you have ever known. But because the first stretch of that road often requires you to walk away from connection that was never truly nourishing you. Connection built on your smallness. Relationships sustained by your willingness to remain limited and predictable and safely unchanged. That is not connection. That is containment. And you were not built for a container. The world will catch up. The right people will catch up. The relationships sturdy enough and genuine enough to survive your growth will not only survive it, they will be deepened and enriched by it in ways you cannot yet imagine. And the relationships that cannot survive it will reveal, through their inability to survive it, that they were always conditional on your remaining small. Let them go with love. Let them go without bitterness. Let them go the way you would release anything that has served its season but cannot come with you into the next one. Your healing is not negotiable. Your wholeness is not up for a vote. Walk forward anyway. Walk forward especially when no one is applauding. Walk forward because the person you are becoming is waiting, just ahead, just beyond the discomfort of this stretch of road, and that person has been waiting long enough. Words are not decorations. They are not the wrapping paper on the gift of thought. They are the gift itself. Every word you speak, out loud into the world or silently into the chambers of your own mind, carries a frequency, carries an instruction, carries a construction crew that immediately begins building the reality that word describes. This is not poetry. This is not metaphor dressed up as wisdom. This is the operational truth of how human consciousness interacts with the fabric of lived experience. And once you truly understand it, not intellectually but in your bones, in your daily practice, in the conscious way you begin to handle language the way a surgeon handles instruments, nothing about the way you speak will ever be casual again. I want to take you back to something I observed early in my years of studying the relationship between mind and reality. I noticed that the people who transformed most dramatically, most permanently, most completely, were not necessarily the ones who tried hardest. Were not always the ones with the most knowledge or the most resources or the most favorable circumstances. They were, almost without exception, the ones who changed how they spoke to themselves, about themselves, about what was possible, about what they deserved, about the nature of the world they were inhabiting. They stopped saying I cannot and started saying I am learning. They stopped saying this always happens to me and started saying this is showing me something I need to understand. They stopped the daily, unconscious recitation of every limitation and lack and grievance that had become the background music of their inner lives, and they replaced it, deliberately and consistently, with a language that aligned with the wholeness they were working to restore. Small shifts, seismic consequences. Let me tell you what language did in my own life during one of its most difficult chapters. There was a stretch of time when circumstances had compressed from every direction simultaneously, when the gap between where I was and where I believed I was meant to be felt not just wide but unbridgeable. And the language I was using during that period, the words I was choosing, mostly unconsciously, to describe my situation to myself, was the language of a man who had already decided the outcome. Words saturated with defeat, with permanence, with the quiet but devastating certainty that this was simply how things were and how they would remain. I cannot overstate how much those words were costing me. Not just emotionally, energetically, physiologically. Every time I spoke the language of permanent defeat, I was sending a signal, clear, consistent, emotionally charged, directly into the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, faithful servant that it is, was building my reality accordingly, constructing evidence for every limitation I named, finding proof for every hopeless assessment I offered. The world was simply agreeing with my language, so I changed the language, radically, deliberately, before I felt differently, and this is crucial because most people wait until they feel differently before they speak differently, which is exactly backwards. I changed the words first. I began speaking about my life the way I wanted it to be, not the way it currently appeared to be. Not in denial of present reality, but in deliberate, faithful, emotionally invested declaration of the reality I was choosing to move toward. And the shift that followed was not magical. It was mechanical. It was the entirely predictable result of feeding the most powerful creative force in the human experience, the subconscious mind, a consistently different set of instructions. The outer world did not change overnight, but my relationship to the outer world changed. My perception changed. My actions changed because my beliefs about what was possible changed. And as my actions changed, as my energy changed, as the frequency of my entire being reorganized around a different set of spoken truths, the outer world began, gradually and then unmistakably, to reflect something new. Ask yourself right now, what is the dominant language of your inner world? What are the words you return to most often when describing yourself, your situation, your prospects, your worthiness? Are they words that open doors or words that seal them shut? Are they words that nourish the seed of your renewal or words that poison the soil before anything can take root? You do not have to overhaul everything at once. Begin with one sentence. One daily declaration spoken not because you fully believe it yet, but because you are choosing to believe it. Practicing belief the way a musician practices scales, not because the scale is the music, but because the scale builds the capacity to play the music when the moment arrives. Speak your wholeness before you feel it. Name your renewal before you see it. Declare your freedom before the walls have fully come down. Language is the first act of creation. It was in the beginning. It remains so now. Use it like you mean it. Every scar you carry is a map. And maps do not exist to remind you of where you have been. They exist to show you how far you have traveled. I need you to hear this. Really hear it, not just process it as a pleasant idea and move on. There is not a single wound in your history, not a single failure, not a single season of darkness or confusion or seemingly irreversible loss that was wasted. Not one. The universe does not produce waste. Life does not generate meaningless suffering. Everything you have walked through, every humiliation that brought you to your knees, every relationship that dismantled you, every dream that collapsed before it could breathe, every version of yourself you had to grieve before you could grow, all of it was purposeful. All of it was preparation. All of it was the patient, sometimes brutal, always precise work of becoming. You were never broken. You were becoming. Say that to yourself. Not as consolation, as fact. I think about the way a diamond is made. Ordinary carbon, the most common element, subjected to unimaginable pressure, sustained over unimaginable time in conditions that would destroy anything less structurally sound. And what emerges from that pressure is not damaged carbon. It is the hardest, most brilliant substance on Earth. The pressure was not the enemy of the diamond. The pressure was the author of the diamond. Without it, there is no diamond. There is only carbon. Unremarkable, undifferentiated, unchanged. Your pressure was not your punishment. Your pressure was your authoring. Ask yourself, who would you be without the struggle that broke you open? Who would you be without the loss that forced you inward? Who would you be without the failure that stripped away every false confidence and every borrowed identity and every comfortable illusion you had constructed about yourself and your place in the world? Would you be wiser? I do not think so. Would you be deeper? Would you be as capable of genuine compassion, not the surface kind, the kind that costs nothing, but the real kind that can only be purchased with personal experience of pain? I do not believe you would. Your wounds did not diminish you. They educated you in ways that no classroom, no book, no period of ease and comfort ever could. And now, right now, in this moment, you stand at the threshold of something new. Not because your circumstances have finally aligned. Not because the obstacles have cleared or the people have changed or the world has become more hospitable to your particular dreams, but because you have done something extraordinary. You have stayed. Through the fracture and the darkness and the inner war and the resistance of those who could not celebrate your becoming, you have stayed. You have kept showing up. You have kept reaching even when the reaching felt futile, even when the distance between where you were and where you longed to be seemed to mock every effort you made. That is not ordinary. That is not small. That is the single most courageous thing a human being can do. To continue faithfully and stubbornly in the direction of wholeness. Even when wholeness feels like a rumor someone told you about a place you have never actually been. You have been there. You were born there. And everything, every section of this journey we have walked together. Every truth we have excavated from beneath the comfortable surface of the life you have been living has been pointing you back to the same destination. Not forward to something foreign and unfamiliar. Back. Back to the pattern that was always there. Back to the wholeness that was always yours. Back to the original, undiminished, undefeated version of yourself that has been waiting, with extraordinary patience, beneath every layer of survival and adaptation and learned smallness that the years have deposited over it. And I want to pause on that word, patience, because it deserves more than a passing mention. The wholeness inside you has demonstrated a quality of patience that I find honestly humbling. Think about how many times you turned away from it. How many times you chose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar freedom. How many times you reached for the old story, the old habit, the old identity, not because it served you, but because it was known, and the known, however painful, carries a comfort that the unknown, however promising, cannot yet offer. How many times you stood at the threshold of genuine change and stepped back. And yet, and this is what moves me most deeply, the wholeness never left, never withdrew, never decided you had taken too long or fallen too far or wasted too many opportunities to deserve another invitation back. It simply waited. With a patience that is, I believe, one of the most profound expressions of love available in this human experience. The love of your own deepest nature for the totality of who you are, including every detour, every delay, every season of resistance and avoidance, and choosing the long way around what you most needed to walk directly through. That love is still here, right now. In this moment, waiting not with frustration at how long it has taken,